Most people are already deciding what to tell you and what to hide from you. Not because they're particularly dishonest, because they've already learned what happens when they're honest with you. I worked with a leadership group in a law firm. They really weren't performing at a high level. One of the partners told me afterwards it changed how she holds people accountable in a way that doesn't derail relationships. So by the end of this, you'll have a four-part system that I used with them and a clear way to see where not having a courageous culture is already costing you. I'm Louise Mathias and I work with barristers, senior lawyers and law firms on exactly this. Not the behaviours that are spoken about on websites, but the behaviour that actually creates the culture in your business or organisational firm that you're working in every single day. But you don't need to have a leadership title to create a culture. You're already creating it. You're a barrister, you're creating it in the way that you work with solicitors, your clients, your admin staff, your researchers, and any other barristers that you are having dealings with in the course of your practice. A mediator, they create a culture in each individual mediation. A senior lawyer creates culture with the people that they work with. A partner creates culture across their team and their firm. A legal CEO or a general counsel, they create culture across the organisation. How you behave affects what other people are prepared to do around you and for you. And that has an impact on culture. That creates the culture. A junior, they come to you asking you to recheck their work. And you've told them before to fix it, it hasn't been done. Your client gets angry because you didn't contact them when you said that you would. And the pressure is on. People are watching how you handle these difficult moments. And what you do next in these difficult moments creates the culture. And here's something that we don't say often enough. You can dislike the culture that you're working in, that you're a part of, and still be the person, one of the people who are helping to create it. You may not have caused it. You may not have the authority to change all of it, but you are responsible for your behaviour, and that has an impact on the culture that you work in. So if I spent a week working alongside you, what would I see? Would people be telling you what they really think? Would they be asking for help? Would they be admitting their mistakes freely? Would they raise problems early? Or would they go silent, working in silos, and tell you only what they think you want to hear? What are people prepared to do around you and for you? And I want you to stick with me because later I'll show you exactly how to answer that question for yourself. And I've built a free tool for it. It's called the Courageous Culture Advantage. You can download it. The link is below if you can't stay until the end. But I want to be really clear about something. Culture isn't the soft side of legal practice. It's the commercial side. It's what you're working in every single day that has an impact on everything that you and your firm or business does. Having good technical people around you is one thing, and it's really important. Getting them to operate at their best, attracting them, keeping them, well, that's another important thing as well. Because you want people to give you their best judgment, their ideas, not just the best technical work. You want them to tell you something that you need to hear, even when they know you might not like it. You want problems raised early while you still have choices about what to do about it. You want good people using their judgment, developing, rather than waiting for you to make every decision. You want the best people to want to work with you, want to stay with you and your firm. And that changes what you know, when you know it, what you can do about it, because that gives you a commercial advantage. So are you getting that commercial advantage now? I like to think about culture like a restaurant. You can put anything you like on the menu. Respect, collaboration, integrity, accountability, high-performing teams. But nobody judges a restaurant only by the menu. they judge it by, well, what comes out after they've decided off the menu, what arrives at their table. Your leaders, your firm, your business, your organization is no different. You can say what you value, put it on your website, in your marketing, pictures on the walls, but people experience what you do. And you find out how good a restaurant is when the kitchen is under pressure. Something goes wrong, somebody makes a mistake, people disagree. You send a dish back, not good enough. That's when you find out whether what's on the menu is the same as what you're getting served, whether they have a standard and they're living up to it. And culture works exactly the same way. A senior practitioner needs to be challenged. Someone makes a costly mistake. A problem has been pushed under the rug for so long that you've run out of rug. Someone needs help, but they worry that it will be held against them if they ask for it. Holding somebody accountable could damage a relationship and they could leave. Now we find out what the culture really is. It's easy to say we want people to speak honestly. It's much more difficult, and it's a different proposition when they're speaking honestly and telling us they think we're wrong. It's easy to expect somebody to own up to their mistake. It's different when the mistake has been costly. It's cost money, or it's affected a client, or it's affected you in some way. It's easy to say, yes, we do not tolerate poor behaviour. It's different when the person involved is senior, powerful, or it's one of your best billers. So what becomes harder for you when there's something real, when there's a real consequence that you could lose something? Because that's where courage is required. And when we're talking about building a courageous culture, this isn't a culture where they only have courage as one of their values. It's where people are willing to take action when they are fearful, when they are afraid, when there is uncertainty, where there is risk, and there's something real that they could lose. Courage doesn't mean fear isn't there. There's no courage without the risk, the uncertainty, the fear, the exposure attached to it. In law, courage can look pretty ordinary, really. It may sound something like, I don't know. I need your help. I got that wrong. I need to tell you what I really think. There's something that we need to talk about. I'm going to show up as myself, not what others think I should be. Those words are not difficult to say. The risk attached to saying them, well, they can be. Showing up as yourself authentically is simpler to describe than to do it. The risk attached to doing it can be real. So what becomes difficult to say or do around you? And to whom? And from whom? Because asking someone else to demonstrate courage is only half of it. What happens when somebody does demonstrate courage? They push back on a decision that you've made. They've owned a mistake, something went wrong, and they let you know before you hear about it another way. They tell you something uncomfortable about what somebody in the team is really doing, or somebody who is more senior is really doing, or they say no to something that you asked for. Do they leave thinking, wow, I'm glad I raised that? Or do they think, I am not doing that again? Because your response affects what they're prepared to do next time. That's why telling people to speak up, be accountable, take responsibility, show more courage isn't enough. You have to look at the behaviour creating and driving the culture you're working in. And I use a 4-part system, and I'll show you that system. It is LOCE, LOCE. And the first one, you'll see my artistic ability. And why I became a barrister and not an artist, is lead yourself. Someone questions a decision or your advice in front of other people. How do you respond? Someone tells you, oh, Sally, you've missed something. What happens next? Someone pushes back on an opinion that you give in a group setting. What do they get back from you? You can't ask other people to demonstrate courage if you're not prepared to demonstrate it yourself. Other people are watching. They can see what happens. They learn from it too. That's lead yourself. But your behavior alone won't create the culture you want if everyone has a different idea about what that culture requires. This is where we go into, oh, let me just write that down. We need to operationalize it. And I'm going to use the example of we say on our website and on our walls and that we value and our behavior is always respectful. We treat people with respect. Fine, great. But what does that mean on a Monday morning in your firm or in your business? Maybe we talk to people kindly and directly and honestly. We don't talk about people behind their backs. Or we challenge an idea without attacking the person or becoming confrontational or aggressive. We don't excuse behaviour from senior lawyers that we wouldn't accept from junior lawyers. Now people have an understanding of what respect means and what is required of them. That's operationalize it. Because if you tell 30 or 50 or 100 people to be respectful, don't be surprised if you get 30 or 50 or 100 different interpretations of what respect requires of them when they become difficult. And if people don't understand what's expected of them personally, you can't fairly hold them accountable for not doing it. So the third part of LOS for C is contribute to it. Can you see that? Great. This isn't something that you hand to a managing partner, a CEO, HR, or people and culture. You create culture too. You either raise the issue or you stay silent. You speak directly to someone or you talk to somebody else behind their back. You challenge behavior that's causing damage or harm, or you walk past it. You ask for help or pretend you've got it covered and suffer in silence. You admit the mistake or you hide it. Both of these are choices, but both of these choices create culture. Just one creates a courageous culture and the other one creates a fear and blaming culture. You can dislike a culture where people stay silent and still say nothing yourself. You can complain about there's no accountability here and still ignore behavior when you know that it's not good enough. You can want people to be more direct and open and forthcoming, but you are a person who avoids difficult conversations. None of us can control anyone else's behavior, but we can control our own, and that's contribute to it. But what happens then if somebody doesn't meet the standard of behavior that you want to create and build in the culture that you would like to see more of? So you have to act on it. You have to E, which is expect it. You have to expect it of others. So what happens? Well, it's easier when they're a junior. What if they're senior? What if they're influential, connected, your boss, someone in the highest position of status, one of the firm's biggest billers, a partner, a barrister? Does the standard change? Well, people notice if it does. So you can't say, well, this is how I behave here, and then show people it depends on who you are. What you tolerate and walk past creates your culture. Is there a behavior in your firm or organization that people know isn't acceptable, but they don't expect anyone to stand up and challenge it? because they don't see it happening. What has it taught them? Well, if you're a person who has the authority to deal with it, choosing not to is still a choice. And you have to take responsibility for creating that culture. That's expecting it. That's expect. And I've seen the cost of getting this wrong. As I said before, I worked with a law firm where the leadership group wasn't performing very well together. It was obvious. The poor leadership was obvious. But what was driving it wasn't. Some leaders had been there for years. Others were newly appointed partners. A power struggle had developed. There was no agreed future for the firm. Alliances had formed. The partners who'd been there for a while had the mindset, this is the way we've always done it. Decisions that needed input from the leadership group were being made individually without consultation. Information was being withheld, and their teams knew it. Some of the people in the teams were afraid to approach other partners due to the alliances that had been formed. The conflict and the way that the leadership team were performing was affecting their decision-making and how the practice was being run. They had their values and their behaviours that they have in their firm on the website. But the problem was what was really happening in their firm was creating the culture that they didn't like. And I spoke individually with each of the leaders to find out what the real problems were, because only by finding out what the real problems are, then they can be solved. So once we understood what was driving the poor leadership performance, well, then we could deal with it. How they dealt with disagreement, how they made decisions, how they worked together, what authority each person had, how they agreed on a future vision, how they agreed on remuneration. Then they had to put it into practice. One partner later said they desperately needed the opportunity to stop and take stock, and that it had a profound impact. Another described the impact on the decision-making and future leadership success as huge. But this is a comment from one of the partners that was really telling. I've been assisted in holding others accountable in a way that will not derail relationships. That's what courage costs and what it buys back. Doing what needs to be done when there's a risk, uncertainty, and exposure, and there is something real that can be lost, still taking that action. So if you're a barrister, will the solicitors, will the clients, other barristers you work with tell you what you need to hear? If you're a mediator, what behaviour are you modelling? And what are you tolerating in your mediations? Because it may cost you. It may cost you further briefs if you're not willing to speak up. That's where courage is involved. If you're a senior lawyer, a partner, a legal CEO, what's the first thing you do when somebody tells you something you don't want to hear? Are people giving you their best? Do they want to work with you? Do they want to stay, or do you have a revolving door of employees? Have they learned what's safer to say and do around you than be totally upfront and honest? Because what they don't give to you has a real cost. You don't get all the information that you need. You hear about problems too late. Somebody doesn't use their judgment. They're not being developed. You become the bottleneck. A mistake gets hidden, and that can be really costly. They disengage, productivity declines, and eventually leave. Everybody knows about the culture where you work, but nobody is willing to stand up and challenge it. That costs you time, money, performance, people, and your reputation, individually and as a business and firm. High performance, it doesn't depend on perfect circumstances or everybody behaving well to have a courageous culture. You need people prepared to choose courage over comfort in moments of failure, uncertainty, or tougher accountability. You want high-performing teams with people who tell you not just what you want to hear, but what you need to hear, who can use their judgment, who can make decisions, who ask for help before they're struggling, who raise problems when there's still choices that are available, who challenge behaviour that just is not good enough, it does not meet the standard, who take responsibility for their part in a problem, who deal with problems instead of walking past them, who have direct, honest conversations with people and not have a culture of gossip and talking behind people's backs. That's not a courageous culture. Now, picture having more people in your workplace who work like that. You'll hear about problems earlier. They're usually smaller, easier to deal with. You'll make much better, faster decisions because you'll have more information. Your best people will give you more of what they're capable of, making your job easier. You will waste less time and money fixing problems that could have been dealt with much earlier and contained. And could people have many more reasons to stay where they are? They're happier. So we're not talking about culture just for culture's sake. This is a commercial and professional advantage. You don't need to change everything at once. Why not start? Pick one behavior that you want more of from yourself and the people also around you. Then look honestly at what you can do when somebody shows it. That's what I built in the Courageous Culture Advantage to help you do that. It's a short, practical tool that walks you through one behavior, the gap between what you say you want and what actually gets rewarded, and one thing that you're going to do differently. So you can download it using the link below, because you don't need a leadership title to create culture. You're already creating it. The question is whether the culture you're creating helps people to give you their best, to be high performers, to create high performing teams, make people want to work with you, stay with you when they have other choices, and to ultimately get the best results. If what I've described today sounds familiar, a leadership team that isn't performing the way it should, decisions made in silos, good people going quiet and eventually leaving, that's not something a PDF or a presentation fixes on its own. That's the work that I do directly with barristers, senior lawyers, law firms, and organisations. If you want to talk about that, what it would look like for yourself individually or your firm, you can visit my website. The link is down below. It's on the advisory page, and the link is below for that as well. So start off by using the PDF, choose one behaviour, start there. If you want more help in creating a courageous culture, you know where to find me.